Good afternoon, and thank you for everyone for participating in NASFA's Learning Series presentation. I'm Jay Young with the Management Technologies, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is entitled, Does One Size Fit All? Unifying the Project, Portfolio, and Facilities Management Lifecycle. A few logistics about the webinar. We'll answer questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit questions as the presentation proceeds. To ask a question, type your question into the questions box on the dashboard and press the send button. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on NASFA's website under Learning Series section. Let's get started. John Salimbene is Senior Director of Business Development with Foresee Consulting, managing the firm's public sector implementation services in the capital program and facilities asset lifecycle segments. He began his career as a pioneer with IBM and Oracle early adopters in offering solutions designed to increase how organizations communicate, collaborate, and automate their present inefficient work processes. John's expertise also includes real-world knowledge of all the major project and facility solutions available today. Tim Brown brings 25 years of in-depth experience to Foresee, including business consulting, project management, thorough knowledge of solutions integration, and expertise needed to improve processes and establish best practices. Tim's extensive implementation and subject matter expertise across all aspects of capital planning, project management, and asset lifecycle practices is of great value to his clients. Tim has worked with some of the industry's leading project and facilities management systems, such as Skyer, Oracle Primavera, Integrator, Bentley, Asset Lifecycle, Triga, and BricsNet. With that, John, Tim.
Thanks, Jay. So good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, if you're on the West Coast. It's a pleasure to be back presenting to the NASFA membership. We look forward to this, as many opportunities as we can get. As Jay mentioned, I'm John Salimbene, and I'm joined by Tim Brown, and you heard about some of the experience we have. We've been working in this market for some time, and really today's presentation is meant to share some of the observations, some of the experiences that we have, and transfer that knowledge to you guys, and to also find and discuss any innovative ways that may be beneficial to any future initiatives that you have. So on the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're hearing in the marketplace. Hopefully that aligns with some of the things that you're hearing. Maybe go over some challenges with the facility asset lifecycle management, project controls. And I think some of you can relate to some of the things that we'll talk about in many of the discussions that I've been in, which is what prompted this approach. Then I'm going to give you an overview of a solution that we've kind of focused in on. I don't think many of you know exactly what it is, but we wanted to expose you to it. We've been kind of born out of the Oracle side of the house and formed this consulting organization. So just to kind of touch base, let you know what's there. It's a number of different opportunities that may present itself. And then Foresee's approach, and then ask and answer any questions or discuss next steps. Just quickly, a little bit more about us. If you remember, we're a systems integration firm that really focuses on increasing the efficiencies of how people work and business processes in the capital project and facility management environment. My focus is public sector. Tim's worked a lot with many different organizations, including public sector. And one of the things that is important to us is how do we approach implementation. You can define any or decide on any product. It's really setting up the environment and creating the strategy, and that's what we want to share with you. So as you can see, great deal of experience that we hope to transfer to you as a partner and a member of NASFA. So just a little bit about some of the public sector clients that we have. I'm not going to go into each one of these, but really the reason I wanted to put this up here is that more we get involved with different public sector clients, we want to encourage communication and collaboration between all of these organizations to share, what works, what doesn't work, lessons learned, and potentially any other opportunities or solutions that may help any of your initiatives. So what we're hearing out there, what's the market saying to us? Well, and you could probably relate to this. There are many technologies available. In fact, there are many technologies that you're exposed to with facility management, real estate, and major capital projects. In the FM world, I mean, these technologies can range from core systems that manage maintenance, leases, move support, as well as space management and real estate applications, which we all have to deal with. And one of the other situations is it needs to be supporting ERP and procurement, which is really the back end heart of some of the agencies with those major implementations. So in the project control space, this is an interesting situation, as you probably all relate to, is you also have to connect to the financial and procurement systems that are running the agency or the many different departments. But what we find ourselves doing is building tools, individual tools, point solutions, as we like to call them in the market, for, say, capital planning, cost, schedule, contract management, you name it. It depends upon the need at the end of the day, or what you can see in terms of implementation of what you believe is going to solve a lot of issues for you. So what we're really challenged with, and typically face our clients, is how do we create a single integrated solution from all the technology, parts and pieces that we run across. And so today, we want to be able to share what we found and potentially give you some ideas of how to develop a facility management and project control system that either can be delivered from soup to nuts, from project management all the way through to operations, fill a gap within what you already have, or potentially be the hub for many different types of applications. So I want to just introduce Tim. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face from his perspective as well as mine. And I think you'll find it as interesting as I did in trying this journey of looking for the Holy Grail, which is that total integrated solution. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Okay. I think I had it, John. But
got it.
Okay. Try that one more time. I don't have the control of the keyboard.
We just practiced that, by the way.
I got it.
Okay.
There we go. All right. Thank you. So, so again, as John had mentioned, most of our clients are in facilities management operations, or they're in project controls. And I like this diagram. I'll click one forward because it kind of shows the interrelationship between these two. So on the right, we can see the beginning of the life cycle. We get an asset that we create, we design it and we build it, we turn it over to operations, it's operated, it's maintained, and then eventually it gets to an end of its useful life, and then the cycle kind of starts over. So I think it's a nice diagram. We tend to have clients that again, and I'm presuming our audience today falls into one side or the other of this, or both, but they are very interrelated. I've got another diagram, I think, that does a nice job of depicting that fact too. That basically the facilities life cycle essentially kicks off projects, which then introduce these assets back in, whether it's the initial project that happens when we first plan a facility, whether it's a sustainability or something that increases the life or increases the capacity of something that we're doing, or in some cases, we decommission these assets. So one of the challenges, and we're right now, again, as John had mentioned, we're focused on pretty much the landscape that we see when we walk into a client and they're either doing facilities or they're in charge of project controls, or in some cases they're over both of those functions. It's a pretty busy landscape. When we walk in order to do our jobs, to do facilities management, to do project controls, there's a lot of moving pieces to that. So here's this diagram kind of depicts that a little bit. And this is a challenge because it's essentially a bundle. It takes a lot of stuff to do what we do for a living. And so, for example, here we see maintenance management, we see move management, space, lease, various functions that it takes to get the job done. And these both at the same time are separate activities, and yet they often have to share information, not just with each other, but with core systems like financial systems. Similarly, when we jump over to the project control side, we have kind of the same story, a very cluttered looking view of what it takes to run a project, you know, costs, collaboration, of course, capital planning to figure out which projects are promoted into our portfolio and are going to get funded and all that kind of stuff. Schedule management's a good one. So at the end of the day, we do quite a few things, and you know, our clients, we walk in and they have several different functions that they do in order to accomplish their jobs. But what makes it even more challenging, as John said, you know, when you try to say, do we have a one size fits all, or do we have the ability to get to a place where we have a single solution or a single portal into which we can look across all these activities. One of the challenges is that we then the clients tend to acquire different technologies along the way. And so, for example, this is back to the facilities management. I'm using the term FALM, by the way, Facilities Asset and Lifecycle Management, but I'm very terribly inconsistent about how I call it throughout the presentation, so apologies for that. But basically, as we go through the facilities management and operations activities, and we start to look at the technology landscape, most of our clients over time have they have 3 different buckets of technology. We can quickly see things fall into 3 categories. The first is kind of like point solutions. So in this slide, maybe I've got Archibus down here that I'm using to help manage moves and space, maybe in combination with AutoCAD. Perhaps I picked up Maximo to handle maintenance management, maybe inventory and tools and things like that, and project or P6 or something for resource and scheduling. But I also, in bucket 2, I've got these core systems that the organization is using for things like finance. So I've got perhaps Oracle or SAP that's handling financial activities, that's handling procurement. So if I need to go out and buy something, I'm typically dealing with these systems. If I need to pay a lease or send out an invoice for somebody to pay me, if I'm a landlord, behaviors like that. These are kind of obvious when we go in and we talk to clients and they have a vision to integrate everything. The obvious ones are the tools they use themselves and the tools that they talk to. The third group is the sneaky group. It's there, but it's hard to find. And it's the homegrown solutions. We see a lot of that, and I'll advance over from this to a project controls world where we sort of superimpose some typical tools here. But invariably, that third bucket are these homegrown solutions. And more than anything else, when we go in and we standardize and build these tools, the single technology that we replace most often is Excel, of all things. And that's because over time, companies either build templates in Excel and then distribute them to their teams, or we just begin to realize that we need some sort of supplemental tool, and we build it in Excel, and it helps us do our jobs. The challenge with that is that gives us bits and pieces of technology, stuff that we've acquired, stuff the company has already built as the core, and then things that maybe have been homegrown. So to go from there to this idea of a single integrated solution, whether it's facilities like this one, and I can go into a core environment like a hub and see what's happening in my leases and see what's happening in, you know, space and move management, or whether in project control side, I can see where my potential change orders are coming from and my risks, and build forecasts based on these things that would potentially impact my forecast. This is often the goal, the vision, if you will. And again, these just are sort of depicting different functions. You guys may have more. I was just running out of real estate when I built these models. But that's our challenge, is to go from all these different systems, some of which already have technologies where the client has invested. So we want to retain that investment. But there's also oftentimes gaps. So we want to fill in the gaps that they don't have it. We want to retain what they do have and they like. And most importantly, we also want to build a hub. But there's one remaining challenge that we also have to face, and that is we don't want to be in the software business or put you guys in the software business. And to illustrate that point, we had a client years ago that decided to buy best of breed technologies for pretty much an environment like this. And each one, nearly each one, was a different vendor. And then they realized when they built their own portal or their own hub that they were suddenly in the software business. And anytime somebody updated the material management system, it broke their integration and they had to update their hub to accommodate for that. And the same thing with each of these. And so one of our goals was to try to find a technology that can act as a simple, easy to use, transparent hub or single point of entry to the system that can also cover a number of these functions if the client doesn't have an investment in something already, and also plays nice with anything where the client already has an investment. And so that's our kind of our challenge in a nutshell. To kind of put it simply, what happened with us is we were looking for an off-the-shelf tool that could handle that hub job, fill in the gaps for any point solution, and that presented us with a low maintenance solution once we were finished. And so for us, we came across the Primavera Unifier product, which is part of the Oracle, used to be the Primavera group, and now I think it's Oracle Engineering and Construction Suite. And so we've standardized on this product because it gives us a very nice point solution for a number of things. It handles, as John will show you in a minute, a number of facilities management functions. It handles a number of project controls functions, but it's also a workflow engine and a nice integrated hub. And so it very easily plugs in and lets me go into a single environment and see what's happening in other worlds and ties them in quite nicely. So, but that alone wasn't sufficient. We also were challenged with tailoring this. It's like a suit that you pull off the rack. It's nice, it looks good, but it doesn't quite fit. And so part of what we had to build was a consistent methodology to be able to very, very quickly go in and do health checks. You know, to take a look at the practice that you have and any issues that you have that you want to change, and to take a look at the technologies that you've already invested in, and to make determinations on whether we want to keep it, perhaps enhance it or upgrade it or replace it. And so it's a little bit of both, a little bit of a toolkit that lets us do a lot of things, as well as a tailored methodology for tailoring a solution to each of the clients, because each client is different. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to John, and we're going to look at both of those pieces. John's going to walk you through a little bit of a Primavera product presentation, and then it'll come back to me and I'll walk you through how we tailor that technology to fit you and to fit your current technology environment.
Thanks, Tim. So just one comment before we get into this is that, you know, again, this is an exposure that we wanted to provide to you because we're have like standardized on it. However, based upon what you're going to hear at the rest of the presentation, we also have the ability, with all the experience in working with partners, such as Imagine It, for example, and working with organizations like yourself to create the strategy and the vision. So for those of you that don't know a lot about Unifier, it was really created by a company called Skyer, which both Tim and I were part of, as well as Primavera. And, Oracle in its infinite direction has acquired a number of different solutions. And really what we do is, I would say, taking their technology and making it more adaptable to different environments. But we also work, again, very closely with some of the other solutions. So for those of you who don't know what Primavera Unifier is, it's really a platform. It's a web-based environment for project management facilities. Some of you may not know that it has both capabilities. The key and the heart of the system is the business process engine, the workflow environment. And as I go into it, you'll see that really this should be the core of how you approach different types of systems and how you automate your processes, starting with what you have now and how you want the system to work. So a number of different things that it offers. I'll go into it. We don't have enough time to go into everything, but just wanted to give you exposure. But one of the benefits, too, of Unifier is the three things that Tim talked about. And that's, if you have nothing, it's something that can give you some pieces or the whole thing, or fill some gaps, or potentially be a technology that you can begin to use as an integrated system. So the business process engine is something I go way back to early days of document management and movement and different types of approval cycles. But the idea is to take something that may take 10 steps and provide some sort of an automation or procedural type of improvement to bring that down to 5, and then begin to model your own processes whereby everybody's on the same page of how things are executed. So this is a big difference in some of the technology that we see in Unifier, being able to unify the life cycle. From a configuration standpoint, the biggest thing that we've seen in a system like this, and we've integrated it with a number of others, such as Maximo and Tririga and even some of the other project management systems, is that it comes with more of an 80% type of template. And the idea is those are the out-of-the-box, the COT solution that Tim mentioned. But the biggest thing is taking that 20% and adapting it to how you want to work. So it comes with a designer, which can be used to not only take it from, say, project management, facility management, but we can create applications such as fleet management or parking type applications, which are used because of the workflow engine. And that's something that goes beyond what a basic project management, facility management system can be in a very configurable way without custom code. So very configurable, flexible. Just quickly, here are some of the capabilities. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but each of these bullets are pillars, if you will, in the capabilities of Unifier. And you can pick and choose. You can, they basically phase in some of these capabilities, or you can add these to your present system that you have in place. So anything from project management to facilities to real estate. And one of the things we see in public sector is funding management and budget control, cash flow, things of that nature, tied in from a project side into, how you operate and maintain an asset. So that's something that has really kind of bubbled to the top. So really what we're looking at here is to try and develop, using the technologies that we have, a portal. Sorry, I'm the klutz, so sorry about that. Anyway, so it's a completely integrated life cycle. One of the things I learned a long time ago is we want one view into everything that we have. So looking at some of the process and workflow applications that you see in the middle, these may be part of Unifier, or they may be something you already have in place. So the biggest, one of the biggest challenges we also face, as I mentioned in the beginning, was the integration to both, assets at the back end for ERP and procurement, and also, managing the financial side. So this is something that everybody, it's kind of the nirvana that we want to be able to get to. And our services are geared towards working with you to get closer to it. So just a snapshot of Unifier. Again, not going to have a lot of time to dig down deep into it. So one of the actions would be, if you want to take a closer look, and just concentrating on project management and this component, anything from planning to scheduling, resource management, risk management. It's a web-based application or can be used on premise. So it's got both options. When you look at project controls, like I mentioned, funding is something that is very important in our business. Contract and acquisition management, speaking to a number of DOTs that may have that to manage their facilities. Also, being able to integrate change control throughout your entire project infrastructure, whether it's be with contracts or internal or different vendors. So this is just a snapshot of what potentially the project management component will look like. On the left-hand side of the screen, you sign on, basically, you get into your task list. But these are the different modules that I was talking about before. So you're able to go in, create your budget, contracts, anything from project initiation, managing your schedule, and this is kind of the first part of the life cycle. And what you're seeing here is just an example at one of the things we're doing at the New York State Thruway, and they're looking at different areas and different construction projects to be able to manage action items, incidents, and different areas of the project. They can also hand this off to contractors. So from the project management side, we move into operations and maintenance. And because it's the same platform, it uses the same information as well as the ability to integrate into workflows, take the handoff, excuse me, from projects and move that into operations. So facilities condition assessments, as you see here, preventative maintenance, corrective maintenance, and it's all in this operations and maintenance component all works together. And it can also plug into whatever you already have to be able to offer more of an integrated solution. So this is just another snapshot just to give you some visual of what the operations component looks like. And these all work together from the project side. You can change this in any way you want in terms of calling it whatever matches your nomenclature and your organization and your agency. So going in and you can do mobile access for condition assessments, all the things that you would think that you need. It's all there. Is it as deep as some of these key technologies such as Maximo and Tririga and Archibus and et cetera. But what it does really is for somebody that doesn't have anything, it can either be anything that it needs to be, or it can again be a ability to fill a functional gap. And the second part that comes up is that you're able to look at the actual maintenance components and then drill down into each one of the projects. So typical types of things that are very that you kind of take for granted. Again, trying to provide a visual view into everything that you have. So, and lastly, or second to last here, is the project collaboration platform. Everybody talks about communication being the main, deterrent to project success and being able to communicate. So the collaboration platform really wraps around everything. Being able to manage documents, communications, emails, different types of sharing information models with, say, Autodesk or Bentley, and also job site mobility. So a collaboration platform that we would work as the integration or the implementation firm to work with you to be able to configure that to your environment. And then lastly, as you get forward, I don't know if many of you are working with analytics or using something on top of many of the solutions that you have, but the ability to manage performance, project and portfolio and facility analytics. What's my time frames, what's working, what's not. As you can see here, a report in terms of labor unit schedule, all those different types of things. And then we're also looking at the ability to integrate to the geospatial world, which I'm sure a lot of us use Esri. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim, and hopefully at some point, or if you're interested, we can get more into Unifier. But what we're going to concentrate on here today is this approach, which is product agnostic, and that's something that we want to be able to demonstrate to the membership, and potentially work with you guys to see where we go. So with that, Tim.
Okay, great. So I think you did it again, John. I think you gave it over to me, and then when you moved, it took it away. I got it now. I got it. Great. So again, the keys to success in terms of building an integrated solution where I've got one quarterback or one hub and I can kind of see everything that's going on is that combination of the off-the-shelf technology plus the tailoring part. And we realized quite a while ago that these were different in surveys that were done by Oracle and by other vendors, where and the first one I saw of this nature was Documentum, and the second one I saw was Maximo. But there was a distinct difference between people's satisfaction with the technology and their satisfaction with the solution that they ended up with. So something like 50% of Maximo clients thought the technology was good, but didn't like their application of it. So there was some kind of a gap in the deployment process. So it's like having a suit that was beautiful on the shelf, but it fits badly, So as we saw this and some things that went wrong and some things that went right, we began to tailor an approach to try to avoid the pitfalls and to take advantage of the kind of the good practice. Interestingly, when Oracle did a similar survey of just sort of clients' satisfaction with a solution, the what went wrong fell in almost consistently into three buckets. The first one was when we would go in and say, and this was true of other surveys that I've read, basically when we focused on what do you do today? So you go in and say, okay, how are we handling this today? How are we doing inventory management? How are we checking out tools? How are we reserving resources, whatever? And seek to automate the process without asking, we would ask, how do you do it instead of should we do it this way? And so that was one of the main goals, is don't replicate the flaw, improve the process. Give the client an opportunity to say, yes, that's how we do it today, but that's not how I want to do it in the future because that practice doesn't work for us. So the technology should reinforce an improved practice. If you don't like how you're doing certain things, then we don't want to replicate that and put it in a system. The second was more related to rapid prototyping. A lot of vendors would have a pre-packaged tool. They'd come out in 90 days and they'd stand it up, and then you would get it and you get to play with it. But most clients said that felt like that was consulting to sell more consulting. And so we want to steer away from that idea of just giving them something that they really can't use, that is simply a prototype or multiple prototypes. The third challenge, generally speaking, where people said, this wasn't working for us, is in many cases, a lot of things were done right. They would go in and say, okay, what technologies do you have today? Well, I've got Maximo and I want to keep it. Perfect, okay. And we've got SAP and we've got this and this and this. Okay, great. What do we need to get rid of? Okay, I need to replace these spreadsheets and this other thing I don't have any technology for. Good, took a survey, and then they did all these things right, and then they picked essentially a function to then build, but they really didn't have enough of an idea of what the big overall solution was to know that later they would have to break some things in order to extend the system. So we see this quite often as people have kind of phased deployment, but they never took the time early on to kind of figure out which system was going to do what. So sometimes we'll see anecdotes like, oh, I just did a massive maintenance project on this roof over here, and while we were at it, we fixed an air conditioning unit, and then we found out it was under warranty later. So things like that, where we're not seeing the big picture clearly enough before we start on the individual initiatives. Well, what went right typically was that the client had a plan. They basically said, you know, they looked at what they were doing and they said, this is working for us, we want to keep doing it. These are areas that aren't working for us. We've got a pretty good practice, or if we don't, we're going to agree on how to do certain things. And they were pretty able to articulate where they wanted to be in 3 or 4 or 5 years once these types of systems were fully deployed. In some cases, it was a year down the road for smaller clients, or 6 months, it just depends. But the main goal was, whether it was a small scale project or major scale IT initiative, that they knew where they were going and they knew what they wanted to accomplish. And then that let them come back, and accompanied with that is this idea of a conceptual design, high level, major overall view of what the entire solution will look like, because it is an integrated solution. It's, you know, our typical project control solution, we own, let's say, budget approval, but the budget also sits in the ERP or the financial system. We may manage a contract, but that contract was procured in another system. So these tools always have kind of a transparent, ideally transparent back and forth integration with other systems. So this worked really, really well. Give me an idea of what the overall solution is going to look like when it's fully deployed, and then let's break it into pieces and build a strategic plan or roadmap to get there. So we basically stole that idea, saw how that worked, saw what went right, and started working that into just our approach. And we do this whether it's a very, you know, basic deployment that just takes a matter of weeks, or we have a larger scale enterprise deployment. So pretty much we look at 3 different aspects. One is the overall vision. What are we trying to accomplish when we're done? So the great thing about capital projects is, if you ask an organization, as an organization, what do you want to be in 2 or 3 years? The initiatives they tell you about typically require capital investment. So if I want to bring on a new service, or if I want to extend some service that I've got, if I want to be better at what I do, or more comprehensive, usually it requires capital investment, which requires us. Once that capital investment's been made, usually somebody has to operate that system or facility and maintain it and you know, keep it moving and sustain it so we get the most out of it. So we want to understand, what's the vision, what do you want out of this initiative? The second is the practice. How do we do it today? How consistent is it? Are we pretty much agreed upon how you know, this practice works, and what do we want to fix? Because these deployment of these systems is always an opportunity for us to say, okay, is there anything about our practice we don't like? I had a client hand one of our technology people a change order form, and the technologist said, I can build that. And the client said, don't, I hate it. So we just want to make sure that we take this opportunity to say, okay, is there anything about the practice we want to fix before we bring in the technology? And then the third, of course, is the tool. So again, we combine this, where we want to be and what we want to, you know, accomplish in the future, with, is our practice ready? Do we have consensus? Are there gaps in it that we want to optimize or streamline? With what technologies do we have? Which ones do we want to keep? Which ones do we want to get rid of and replace? And then we build that into a recommended solution and work with you to basically say, how do we want to deploy this? So pretty much, it's kind of a 4-pronged approach. we first developed this approach pretty much to build conceptual design deliverables in the design phase, much like you do if you're building, you know, a life cycle of a facility. If you're going to go create a brand new building, you're going to say initially, well, what's my concept and what does it have to accomplish? And then you're going to do a detailed design and blueprints and other things that tell everybody exactly how to build it. And just as importantly, refine the estimate, both in terms of schedule and cost. And then of course you build it. We do kind of the same thing. So the conceptual design, critical to this. But what we learned is, and what we do now, is we also offer a health check as part of our kind of pre-project activity. So if a client or potential client, if somebody says, look, I think I'm interested, but I'm not sure we're ready for this, or I'm not sure what gaps we have, we've created a light version of our conceptual design that we call a health check. Behaves very similarly to a full-blown conceptual design. And again, we go in and we work with you. We have questionnaires and things that we send out in advance, and then we come in and we hang out with you, and we basically go through what are the business objectives, what are we trying to accomplish, where's our current practice, what are our key requirements, what does the system need to do. Look at the surveys, survey the tools and technologies. What do we have? What do we need? What do we want to enhance? What do we want to replace? All that kind of stuff. At that point, we usually have enough to walk through and optimize, build an optimized solution. So essentially a future state, this is what it would look like to do your job in the future if we did everything you've asked for. So that is kind of like if you're used to current state and future state modeling, this is like a future state, but it's got the technologies tied into it. So I go out and I model my lease, I set up my key dates, I set up my clauses, etc. And it does this, and then the system tells me when I need to pay, and then it goes over to the ERP and says, please pay this, and then it pays it, and it comes back with a confirmation, etc. So it's kind of a day in the life, future state. We model that here, and then we sit down with you and say, okay, this is what it would look like if we built everything. How, you know, what's high priority for you? What's lower priority? What order do you want to deploy things? Some clients deploy everything at once. Some clients say, well, let's just do a phased deployment. And that's where we work with you to kind of strategize. We know what we want. We know what it's going to look like when it's built. Now, how do we get there? And what's the associated budgetary estimates? What are the associated schedule estimates? What type of resource investment does it require on my part, you know, on the client's part? The health check, like I said, is a light version of a conceptual design. Typically, we just go on site for a day, half a day to 1 day, sometimes 2, depending on if we're doing both project controls and facilities, and walk you through these discovery workshops, talking about your practice and what you're doing, and kind of walking through all these different topics that we've talked about. Then we go offline, we put together some documentation and come back and say, okay, we think this is what you're telling us, and this would be a good approach. This is how we would link into these other technologies, etc. And we present you with a solution and talk through different deployment options. Again, health check isn't a full conceptual design. It's just something that we offer at no charge to folks that are kind of saying, I've got bits and pieces. Some work, some don't work as well. I think I want to go down the path of trying to consolidate, but I'm not sure what my next steps are. So we come in and do these things. We pester you for a half a day to a day on site, maybe 2, and then come back for a quick meeting after about a week or 2, and pretty much just review this type of stuff with you. We give you a nice little care package of our recommendations. So we reiterate back to you what the needs were that you brought up and the objectives. We give you a future state model. This is what's going to happen in Unifier. This is what's going to happen in Maximo. This is what's going to happen in SAP or PeopleSoft or whatever. We show you how we've tried to resolve key requirements and concerns in the future state model. And then we basically break it down into like an IKEA diagram, nothing that complicated, I promise. But the concept being, okay, these are the pieces you've already got. This is the stuff you need to get. And these are the scopes and costs associated with each of those things. And then again, if we have enough data at that point, we can talk about how we would recommend you deploying that. A lot of times that's decided by the client, by budgets, by some impending event where I need a certain system in place by a certain date, but we work with you to do that. And so that's kind of how we tailor these solutions. John gave you the what, the technology. I'm kind of giving you the how, and then I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Tim. So I just wanted to kind of express that the approach that we wanted to take to this webinar was really to transfer some of our experience and some of our knowledge, give you some ideas, you know, provide more of our our lessons learned, our experience. And this health check that we're talking about was something that we really kind of developed for the public sector side and the NAFSA membership. So the initial health check is something that we invest in, so there's no cost to you, and it gives us a chance to interact as a member, as a partner, with where you want to go, and so we can exchange information and go forward from there. So that's a potential option we would like you to look at. And the biggest key really is, as you implement different technologies, is to develop the strategy, make sure that you're ready for a phased approach or the big bang. Make sure that you have the resources to do it. Our recommendations. We would share all of that information together, and then really kind of recommend where we feel you should go. So that's really our objective to this. The Unifier component that we showed you is really because we felt that it was that not many people knew about it. And I sit in these meetings and I hear about all different types of solutions, and I just wanted to express one of the benefits that we see in that solution. But we really do look at the bigger picture, and that's something that will help us develop a plan together. So looking at the kind of the health check, and then potentially if you decide you want to go this way, we would like to deeper dive into what I really couldn't show you is the details for some of the systems or capabilities that Oracle Unifier and their analytics and their Primavera component and all the things that we're exposed to. So, but again, the main objective is to help advance each one of the agencies and departments in a way to improve performance. So that's kind of our presentation. I would like to take the next step to answer any questions that you may have. Okay.
Yeah, so let's get started. This is Jay, and so if you have any questions, please type them into the question box on the dashboard and press the send button. There's a couple questions, so I'll read those to you, John and Tim, and then you could ask those. Here's the first one. Can you elaborate on how you might integrate a current facility management system with the project functions that you mentioned in Unifier?
Tim, you want to take that, or you want me to? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So one nice thing about Unifier is it's got a very simple set of tools on which we can build integrations. One thing that we've done is on the Unifier side, we're pretty familiar with the touch points for integrations. So we've prefabbed some tools also on that side. So for example, I know on project controls that I'm going to have some touch point on a lease or contracts or invoices and things like that where I've got to talk to a financial system. And similarly on the facility side, we have known touch points from the start. So much like with Unifier itself, we as a vendor have also built kind of, I think John said 80% solution to where for our ability to facilitate the ability to integrate with other systems. So basically, the practice is we've got these prefabbed hooks. We go in and take a look at the systems that you've got. We always have to tailor the data to some degree because different clients want different information exchanged. And basically that's it. The tools are pretty simple. We build it, and most cases we try to work ourselves out of a job where we train the client then on how to maintain the admin side of things.
Tim, let me add something to that too. Because we are a technical group as well, we've developed this solution, if you will, or really a product called Data Integrator. And what it really does is it advances the workflow in the capital project and facilities market to be able to have intelligent components to automatically generate kind of machine generation of automatic triggers to be able to do that and move that to the next step. It also, for example, when we look at the New York State Thruway, they're integrating 25 different components of a 25-year-old project management system. So with the migration that needs to happen is something that we use this tool to be able to move data into the new system. And then we also have the ability to take the integration platform that we have and begin to share information between different functions. So it's already pre-developed, and kind of like the old days, if you've been around, is more of an adapter that is pre-built for specifically for capital projects and facilities. So just a heads up. Any other questions?
Let me look here. Again, please, if you have any ideas or questions, please type them in and push the send button. Yeah, we have another question that came in. How would you approach the exchange of information to the ERP system when IT will not permit direct access to the data, such as like a budget information?
Yeah, that's not uncommon, where we'll go in and either because IT won't permit it or because it just takes a long time to engage IT, that it's easier for them to just simply give us a dump of data. So usually that's what we do. We get them to give us every day just a dump of certain data. So just go ahead and send me all of the invoices from yesterday. And then, as John said, we have a tool called Data Integrator that has this prefabricated logic and hooks to different parts of Unifier. And we pretty much just configure that to sift out what is different between yesterday's dump and today's dump. Just look at the files that are new or have been changed, and then quickly update Unifier with those. So it's not an uncommon question, and it's pretty easily handled.
And the integration is something that usually comes after you set the strategy and you start to implement, because exchanging that data can be really a major decision. But we have a couple of different options, one low cost and one more of a permanent type of approach. So it really depends upon what we find in the discovery. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we'll take one or two more questions. We're getting to the bottom of the hour here. And here's a question that just came in. Does Unifier have a computerized maintenance management built in? Or does it link to what is in use today, or both?
Sorry,
one of the screens that, go ahead.
I was just asking for a repeat.
Yeah.
Okay. Does Unifier have a computerized maintenance management built in, or does it link to what is in use today, or both?
Okay, so I guess the answer would be both. Unifier has a maintenance management module, and that also tackles related activities like inventory management, you know, the various flavors of maintenance management, from on-demand to preventative, things like that, portals so that users can request a work order without having to have a license, for example, of the software. So it's got all of those types of behaviors in it. But as with anything else with Unifier, the idea is we've got probably a module that can handle it, in this case, maintenance management. If you've got something that you love or it's better, then we can simply integrate with what you've got. And in some cases, the only both I've seen is where the client has sort of peripheral systems. Usually you want to try to standardize on a maintenance management tool that they've got or bring in Unifier. If you want both to coexist, there's usually an odd kind of use case for that. The one that I've seen was where we needed to reserve resources. And so Unifier was going to do the maintenance, but they wanted us then to request resources. For example, you know, I'm going to need your audio-visual guy who's an operational person to come over to my project site and install your AV equipment because you want him to do it, not me to do it. So there have been cases where I've seen us tie into other systems, but usually you'll use Unifier's maintenance or you'll use your own, and we'll tie other activities into that.
But Tim, we've seen a lot more, or more of the project side integrating to the, say, a third party or a Maximo or Tririga from the project management side. Some of these solutions that we use that are out there, you know, do, you know, one or two things right. So we give you the option of, if you want to use Unifier, be able to kind of get that best of breed, you know, type of value.
That happens a lot. So, for example, yeah, at British Petroleum, when a project, even though it was in maintenance, when they had a series of activities and it got to be more or less the size of a project, they would kick it back out to Unifier and run it, even though it was quote unquote funded as a maintenance project. Because of the scale, they would have Unifier run it and then push back into their other systems. So we've seen scenarios like that, where there's the project control tools, as you say, work with a maintenance system. We always try to encourage that, especially at the end of a project, where we deliver to operations a ready-made packet of, here are the assets, here are the serial numbers, here's everything you need, O&M manuals. So we try to make sure that when we design the project control side, we're capturing deliverables and things from contracts, and eventually when the project closes, to transition to operations more easily.
So if anybody has,
thanks guys.
You know, Jay, if anybody has any other questions, there's my contact information. We certainly would like to share additional, you know, one-on-ones if you want, and you know, go forward from there. Again, we want to be able to share information with you and really become a valuable member of this NASFA organization. So it's very important to us. Thanks, Jay. Go ahead.
Hey, John and Tim, I want to thank you for some outstanding information, and for everyone else for participating in the webinar today. Just a note, our next webinar is going to be January 30th, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The webinar is going to be use data to solve problems faster and easier. And you can go on the NASFA website for more information and registration at www.nasfa.net. And if you would like to present a webinar or suggest topics, please contact NASFA at nasfa@csg.org. And this is your opportunity to be involved and showcase your state, your department, your projects. And quick reminder, the slides and the recording of today's presentation will be on NASFA's website either later today or tomorrow under the Learning Series section. So again, thank you for participating, and this concludes our program.
Thank you.